Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Microsoft Zero to Hero. This edition is .NET July, and we are almost mid-July. I mean, not almost, we passed mid-July. And this today, it will be our third session. I'm Shahab, the host for this event. And in the first two sessions, we talked about how to bring AI into your MAUI applications. And then in the second session, we talked about the basics and the concepts that we should always care about as software engineers. Because at the end of the day, whether we're using AI or any other tools, we are engineers and we want to build robust and trustworthy applications. Let me share some news from the community. So you could always follow us on microsofthero.com, follow the news and the programs that we have. We are a community built by the community, and we are here to share our learnings together. There's only a single code of conduct, and that is be respectful, hear each other's opinion. I'm pretty much sure there's always things to learn from each other. Follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you want to see what is the upcoming sessions, go to the calendar section, and there you could see what we have up to for the upcoming ones. And today we have Sean. He will talk about accessibility in .NET MAUI. And without further ado, I would like to invite Sean on this stage. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Welcome. Thanks for accepting the invitation and being here with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Really
Perfect.
Accessibility.
Tell us more about .NET MAUI accessibility and with the community. The stage is yours. However you prefer to start it, just go for it.
Okay. Yep. I'll jump into the slide if that's okay, and we can get going. Just confirming you can see the slide fine.
Yes, we see the slides.
Excellent. Good stuff. Okay. So hello everyone. My name's Sean Lawrence, and today I'm going to be talking to you about something that's becoming more and more important as developers, and that is accessibility. Now, I do appreciate accessibility isn't always the first thing that we think about when we start a new project, but I hope to change people's opinions on that today. Usually we think about getting the UI looking right, fixing bugs, trying to squeeze in a bit more performance out of the application, and then accessibility often becomes something that we'll say we'll come back to later. So we build that tech debt. But hopefully what you'll see today is the APIs that come from .NET MAUI, you'll actually see really doesn't require much effort. And as we know with tech debt, later very rarely comes. And then before we know it, we've built an application that's impossible or at least frustrating for some people to use. And so today I want to show you it's not scary to introduce these features. It doesn't require rewriting your application. It doesn't require being an accessibility expert. Quite often, it's just about understanding a few APIs that .NET MAUI already gives us. And then we'll also spend some time looking at least the tooling on the macOS side, and there's some reference to the Android and Windows options as well. So you can learn how you can test your applications to prove that they are accessible. So then hopefully by the end of the session, you'll leave thinking that you can do this because you absolutely can.
So we will get equipped with build applications accessibility first.
Yes. Well, what you'll see is actually I've deliberately built an app that is not accessible, and then I can show you how you can then talk around accessibility. I will show you then the experience someone that might turn on some of the accessibility tools on a phone would experience, and then we can look to actually how we can improve that experience through these APIs that you can use. Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay, perfect.
It's broken down into a couple of parts. So the first part is why accessibility matters. So when people hear the word accessibility, they often imagine it's something that only affects a relatively small number of users. But accessibility is much broader than that. If we take the three examples on this slide, now there are many others you could think of. Say maybe you've broken your arm. Suddenly you've only got one hand available to interact with your phone. Given the weather outside, you might have stepped out into bright sunshine, and therefore contrast becomes particularly important because the glare of the sun can actually then affect things. Or maybe you're trying to order some food while you're holding a sleeping baby. I know we probably shouldn't have our phones when we're dealing with that, but I've certainly been guilty of that in the past. And suddenly the tiny touch targets that you might have on a phone then become very difficult to hit. So when you think about those few examples, accessibility isn't about building software for someone else. It's actually about recognizing that every one of us experiences different abilities depending on circumstances. Now, these could be permanent, they could be temporary, or they could be situational, which the three here highlights. With that, we can then consider that good accessibility actually benefits everyone. So one thing I have noticed over the years is that accessibility improvements almost always do improve the application for everyone else. It's on the previous slide. So larger buttons, that would make it easier for everyone. Better contrast, again, easier for everyone. Clearer labels, easier for everyone. Introducing something like keyboard navigation. Now that would probably be easier for power users, or but then it does also provide tactile feedback for your users. So when we build accessible software, we're not creating a special version of that application. We are simply just building a better application. And I think that's a very important mindset to consider here. It's not an extra feature, it's just part of the quality of the application that we're building. So if we then go to have a look at what accessibility means, I first went back in the day when accessibility really first came into my forethought. I had built an app for a client, and then they came and started asking questions about topic of accessibility, because it turned out that the majority of the end users were in the much older age range, because it was around COVID time, and actually we wanted to build an app that would allow them to monitor the conditions of the patients at home. And that then meant it had to be easy for the end user to use, because there wasn't always going to be a nurse or a doctor there to do it for them. So that's kind of what led me on to some of this in the journey. So when I first did that, I mostly thought it was, oh, we just bang a few labels on, and then job done, we can make it easy to present to it. But it is actually much bigger than that. And it actually comes down to whether someone can actually operate your application. So can they read the content? Could they navigate it with a keyboard? Does your application respect larger text sizes? Can you tell the difference between success and failure if they're colorblind? Now I'm red-green colorblind, but I can mostly tell the difference between at least icons, but colors can sometimes prove a challenge. So I fully appreciate that one. Does focus move somewhere sensible after closing dialogues? If it gives you, I mean, VS Code is probably a very good example of that. When you try to change a setting in the bottom and then the menu pops up at the top, that's not a very good accessible approach, because you're shifting the focus from one side of the screen to the other. But I'm not here to critique other applications, but that's just an example of where I think things could be improved. So all of those do contribute to accessibility, and today we'll touch on each of them.
So even the navigation from one point like to another, like if you want to do different tasks, it's part of like consideration when it comes to the accessibility.
Precisely that, yes. Because if you imagine the user's focus will be in a certain area. Yeah. So guiding them, you don't want to have to guide them somewhere else away from where they are, or at least you can make that transition as smooth and easy as possible. Another possible topic around that is then the concept of things like animations as well, because they could be really nice to throw in, but actually that can have a detrimental effect. It can be. So there are, I mean, lots of the operating systems now have the concept of essentially disabling or reducing the effect of animations, but it's still certainly something to be mindful of. Yeah. So I think you can still bypass that. So. Okay. So it's definitely something very valuable. Yeah. But let's go and have a look at how we can get this completely wrong, and then look at how we can potentially improve things. So for today's session, I've designed a little Maui Mart application. And I do apologize, it is designed to be fairly poor to use, but again, that's part of the point. And I've tried to include a few common mistakes that quite often get made. And then by the end of the session, we can look at how we've made something more accessible. So this will include tiny buttons, concept of placeholder only inputs, icon only actions, poor contrast, decorative. Actually, rather than just reading those, so tiny buttons. That's the tiny touch targets. So obviously you want to have something big enough that someone could touch. Placeholder only inputs. There's the concept of if you've got an entry field, as soon as you enter it and start typing, the label explaining what that entry does has disappeared from the user. So or if they load it back up, then it's difficult to see. Icon only actions. Quite often, if you put in fancy image on a screen and you make it perform an action, the screen reader can't determine what it does, not magically. So you have to provide context to it. Poor contrast. Should hopefully be fairly self-explanatory. Decorative images. So quite often you want to make sure that things that aren't part of your UI aren't part of the visual tree or accessible tree. So a screen reader won't present something that is meaningless to the user. And then the concept of headings, which we will actually get to in as part of the demo. So what we can do now is if we load up the app. Here is our application. It's just aimed at allowing you to view some items and potentially buy them. I ran out of ideas, so hot drinks is a rather loose term for all of those, but hopefully it still gets the point across. So what I'll do first is if we tap on here, you'll see that it takes you to some details. We've got an icon here on the left that I shouldn't mouse over that. That is the typical favorite icon that you'll see, but what it doesn't do, there's no text there to give any kind of indication to the user. Now, if we go back, I can turn on the voiceover assistant. That's a very good thing for us to test with.
Voiceover on.
Hopefully everyone can hear that. We can then swipe between items. So it'll tell us it's hot drinks.
Coffee.
Tell us coffee. If we come in here,
Coffee.
then we can swipe around.
Coffee. $12.90.
Those details, and then when we get to the heart icon, I actually can't hear this very well.
Premium dark roast coffee beans. Button. Heart.
Just says button heart.
Mm-hmm.
That's mainly because that's the name of the image. So if you didn't even use a sensible image, then it could go
Premium
rather poorly wrong.
Back. Coffee.
The topic of headings from the slide, though, you'll see actually what we've got here is we've got sections, hot drinks and food. Quite often to provide an easy way for users to navigate around. So one thing you can't actually see what I'm doing on my phone is I'm swiping. So if you swipe left to right, you'll go to the next item.
Coffee.
And right to left, you go back.
Hot
if you swipe
drinks.
up, top, down, that will take you to the next section.
Found.
So in theory, you could assume that hot drinks and food would then be sections, but that doesn't exist.
Heading not found.
The voiceover assistant is telling us it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
menu.
there's that. And then I think one final thing to
Value
show
mark.
is
Profile.
in here.
Menu. Button. Menu. Personal information. Settings. Help and support.
So I've been a little naughty here with how I've built the app, and I've done this in the past, is that it's essentially you've got a border here that has a command that will then perform an action. But actually only because it's presented to the user as a piece of text, it doesn't even tell them that it could do something. So if they tapped it, it would do something,
profile,
but they don't know that. So you can actually start to then appreciate how limiting some of this is to them.
I think for this session we could also enable like auto captioning on our channels, like for people like to have it like as we are streaming, it could have been like auto captions. But I think this feature they could enable depending on the platform for themselves as well, right?
Okay. Yeah, that would be really nice to see.
Yeah.
Search.
And then yes, we've got two icon buttons here as well.
Search. Try search button.
That just says button from what I can tell. So you can see that actually there's lots that we can do to actually make this experience better to a user.
Yes.
For a user. Just turn voiceover assistant off.
Accessibility select
out.
voiceover off.
Put that down, and then we'll go back to the slides. Yes, so that's our application. It does quite a few things wrong, but hopefully we'll, over the course of the next few slides, we'll see how easy it is to fix those things. So let's gain some more understanding and actually see how we can make our first improvements. So before we do jump into fixing Maui Mart, I would like to just explain a little bit about what is happening behind the scenes. Because once you understand this, it should hopefully help to make things a lot easier or more straightforward. So when we look at our application, we see buttons, labels, images, even you can tell the layouts. Obviously, they're not always visual, but you can tell that, I mean, there's not color or anything distinguishing where things are, but you can see that things are located in different places. But a screen reader doesn't see this. It just inspects pixels on the screen. And so what it does is it interacts with something called the accessibility tree. And now if anyone else has built other applications, you'll most likely be aware of the visual tree that you build when you do develop things. And then if you do UI automation testing, you will then be looking through that visual tree to identify elements that you then want to invoke behavior on or verify through your testing. The accessibility tree is something very similar to that, but you can opt things in and out of actually being visible within that tree. And that's precisely what you want to do. So you only actually expose the information that's relevant to the screen reader, and therefore you then give a better experience to your end user.
Okay, so it's a separate kind of tree than the XAML tree that we have usually in our applications, which is focused on the accessibility features or functionalities that we want to expose, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you see that's the way that these voiceover assistants will navigate those.
Mm-hmm.
I say voiceover is iOS, but you've got TalkBack or Narrator on the other platforms as well. So instead of just containing colors and fonts, what we need to do is we need to contain some meaning. So you might say that this is a button, or this is a button called search. Double tap it to activate it.
Mm-hmm. Or
this is a heading.
Okay.
So every time a screen reader moves around your application, it is navigating that tree. It's not, and you've kind of come to this point, is it's not navigating your XAML directly. So your job isn't simply just to build a UI; it's to build. We build the UI, but then we're building an experience as well. And then I think the combination of those two then fall into kind of building a meaningful accessibility tree. Okay. Or that's a prerequisite, an input to your good user experience, we could say. And the nice thing is that .NET MAUI does do a lot of this for us.
Okay. Like with the APIs that it provides out of the box, it handles those things. Yeah.
Yes. So actually, if we were to look at a button, for an example, and I've taken an assumption that people have an understanding of what .NET MAUI is. I've not gone into an introduction on that. But what it does do is you put a button in your XAML and it will then create a platform-specific implementation. So you put a button in your XAML, you'll get a UI button on iOS, a button on Windows, and so forth. But what it also does is, because you're then using the platform-specific implementations, you then get the platform-specific accessibility implementations out of the box. So on Android, you get the content description. iOS, you get the accessibility label, and Windows is automation properties, which then means that the platform-specific voice assistants already know how to navigate those items. So it's not having to deal with anything that's just drawn on the screen through any other means. We are making use of it's using that same approach, how MAUI turns something that you define into something visual. That also then benefits us in terms of giving us the hooks into the accessibility APIs and the accessibility tree. Yes. So that then means that we have one code base, but native accessibility. And the general rule of thumb is, if you want to put something on a screen that performs an action, like a button, you want to click something or tap it, use a button. If you use an image or like I did in this app, use a border and then stick a gesture recognizer onto it to allow someone to interact with it, that doesn't automatically tell the user anything. So if you can use a button, do it. If not, we'll go through the mechanism, the steps to make it clear, make it look like a button really, is what we'll end up doing. So yes, we did hear the voiceover assistant talking about this earlier, and it did tell us they were buttons. I think one did say it was search, but that's probably because it came from the name, or maybe that was a search bar. It was quite difficult to hear. But most often, without giving it any context, it will tell you it's a thing that you can interact with, but it won't necessarily tell you what that interaction will do. So if you imagine if you've got a search button, a filter button, maybe even a delete button, and you can't distinguish between them, it's going to make it rather difficult to fumble your way around to actually carry out any task that you might like to do. But there is a very simple way to fix that, and there's a class that you want to become familiar with, which is called semantic properties, and on it has a number of different properties. The key one for this is semantic properties.description, and you can think of it as the spoken name of the control. So if someone can't see your interface and then the voice assistant reads aloud, instead of saying button, in this example, it would actually say search products. And that's a tiny code change, but actually it makes a massive improvement in usability, because you're then indicating what that button does. So then as a really good way to test it, you could close your eyes and try to navigate an app. You could actually quite easily try to, you have much more of a better understanding as to what was going to happen when you interacted with that control. So the underlying message there is tell users what the thing on the screen is, and what. So we can actually go and have another quick look at that. So what you'll see in the code base here is, so as a brief, to jump back another. I mentioned that I deliberately built a broken application, rather than messing around with just having a bad one and then lots of commits or Git branches or tags to a clean one. I've put them both side by side because it just sometimes becomes easier to compare, and you don't have to worry about all the fun around Git. So our search screen was here, and what you'll see, this is the broken one, and I'll open up the accessible one as well first. We can jump in. So what we'll see is we've got a button, it's got search, but that's it. We just know that it has an image. We can ignore that one, and then again we've got another button here, but again it just gives us an image there. What we can do is, in our code, if we then find that button, we can then add, well actually here, what we've done is we've added the text search, and this is a very interesting point, which I might be giving a spoiler on another slide, but you don't have to always put semantic properties.description if the text already gives you that context. So if you're putting the text up on screen, it will affect it, and you put semantic properties.description as well, you may end up repeating the same information, and that's not beneficial. Okay. So if you
how does that work? Like the semantic properties, will it read the whole sentence that, for example, you have in line 25?
It will, yes. Okay. I can demonstrate that. Yes. So I mentioned the semantic properties.description. That's telling you what something is. We've then got semantic properties.hint, which then tells us the action that's going to be performed. And sometimes, that's quite often the more valuable thing to put there. So yeah, so the search button, that changed entirely from an image to text, and we put the hint on there. Then on this other side, we've then got the filter results one, and actually here we've just put a description there. and we probably should have put a hint. But you can see that we can then actually give you an example of how they both behave. So in the flyout menu, there is a set of the broken and then the accessible options. Turn voiceover assistant on.
MAUI search button performs the search for the entered product name. Open filter options button.
Yes. So you see that told you the name of it, but it didn't tell you what it did. You could potentially there is sometimes a fine balance between having the voiceover assistant talk for ages. So whether you can have something that's short and concise in the name that implies what it will happen, versus sometimes you might want to provide the hint that gives the end user.
What is the difference between a hint and a description in this case, like in this scenarios, like when to use each of them?
So if we jump back to my slide, I'll jump onto the next slide. These was a kind of a breakdown of the difference, and these are explaining what the difference is. Now, if we were to say we had a checkout button.
Checkout button?
Like, yes. If you had a checkout button and you...
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if that's a good example or not. Well, we'll work with it anyway. If you had a checkout button, whether you would need... The question comes down to whether there's enough context for the end user to know that checkout will take them to complete their purchase, or whether you think you would need to add a hint to say, this will complete your purchase or take you to payment screen. I've been involved in teams where there's been endless discussions as to what the right user experience is. Quite often there's positives and negatives on either side. So as long as you're not being overly verbose that the voiceover assistant never stops talking, you are most likely going to be providing a good amount of information to the user.
Okay.
And again, it's a short, very short sentence in terms of a hint. It's not an essay.
Yeah, definitely.
We did that live demo, so we've jumped over a little bit. Sorry, actually no, I hit the wrong button. That's why. And so there is an example of the checkout. So here I wouldn't bother putting the semantic properties.description because it doesn't add any value above what text is already there, but it gives us a talking point. And then the next discussion then comes around is whether you would then use the hint or whether checkout would be enough. In this scenario, I probably would still stick with a hint, but a hint, I think, becomes particularly important when you might be dealing with, say, destructive actions like a delete, because you can then make it crystal clear the impact of tapping that button.
Yeah.
And obviously, quite often, it's not a hit delete and it's gone. You typically have a confirmation, so you might then also refer that hint onto the confirmation as well. And that then comes into a kind of a bit of design. If you imagine that you've got a general purpose pop-up that is like a yes or a no, but you've asked them if they want to delete, you want to make sure that the yes is presented as a very destructive action. Whereas if you're saying, well, do you want to save, and you're using the same pop-up, then that's not destructive.
Yeah.
So you just have to be mindful of that. You're actually retaining that context even in a different presentation. Yes, good. So then another topic is headings. So I did mention this, and it is a surprisingly underused feature. It took me some time to actually appreciate the real value of it. I actually saw a talk by someone who was a guy named Guy Barker, who built an accessible solitaire game in .NET MAUI.
Oh.
Which is, I don't know if it's recorded anywhere. I certainly recommend checking it out. He did an excellent job of that. And he kind of drew out some emphasis on this side, because you can then shift around. You imagine with solitaire, you've got the pot and then you've got the deck, and then the 7 items on the bottom. So you've got a good set of headings. It's possibly a slightly different shift to a typical business app, but it's a nice way to consider how you could do that. So I'll just give a quick demo of the headings, given that we've fixed that in this application now. So in the home screen. Right. So now if we go to hot drinks,
heading,
so if I swipe up,
image,
oh,
explore,
no, I
activate.
tapped in the wrong.
Hot drinks.
So swipe
heading,
down,
food,
it'll go to a different heading.
heading
It won't go
not
any
found.
further because there is
Heading
no
not
other
found.
heading.
Heading not found.
But
Hot
then
drinks.
it'll go up.
Maui Mart. Hot drinks. Heading.
Yep. One thing that I don't know if anyone's familiar with, if anyone's played around with voiceover assistants, iOS is really cool. If you put 2 fingers on your screen with the voiceover assistant on and rotate, you can actually change the mode of shifting around. It's called the rotor. So the other thing to consider then is that users can actually then choose how they navigate your app based on this setting.
Characters.
So like
this is
there,
only iOS, right?
this is iOS only, yes. I don't know if there is I don't know of an equivalent on the other platforms.
Maui Mart. Hot drinks.
Yeah, so then you could get it to navigate around different areas. Let me turn that off and we'll jump back to the slides.
There's a question.
Yep.
With those graphics, how does Maui handle color blindness?
So Maui won't do anything out of the box for you. That's a lot of on your own part. What you can do, and I'll mention it a little bit later on, but is there are some tools on each platform. So, and Google have one, Apple have one, Microsoft have one. I think Android is baked into the Play Store submission stuff now, but you can push your app through some level of validation in terms of accessibility, and it can then determine whether, so maybe the contrast is poor in your application, or if you do want to consider color blindness, then you might need to change your color schemes. I don't know if it goes as far as actually recommending a color scheme. Keeps us in a job still. But there are some really great tools out there and they all come from the platform, so they're readily available and free. Thoroughly recommend them.
I also shared a link to like the QA session of this .NET MAUI community stand-up that you mentioned with the Guy Barker about like accessibility in the chat. So if anyone's interested, they could go and like, I think it's a couple of articles and YouTube videos like that talks about that. Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, good. Yes, so I mentioned that decorative images is on the not to-do list. Typically, an image when you put it in won't actually appear in the accessible tree unless you opt in. So, if like I say, if you're putting an image there, and then you want to enable that to perform an action, you need to tell it to be included. And that's actually, you don't have to do anything other than just give it a description. There might be sometimes though where there's a part of the UI that you have that you actually explicitly don't want to be presented to the visual tree. Not the visual tree, sorry, the voiceover assistant. And there's another option there, so you can exclude things from that visual tree, very accessible tree, through that option there. So if you've got, certainly make sure if you've got decorative backgrounds or anything like that, then you want to make sure that those are not presented. Yes. So a very good tip I learnt along the way is that you don't want to describe what something looks like, but you want to describe what something does. So if you look back to the product page where you saw we had the heart, it said it was a heart button. But that's not really that helpful. If you actually say, add this to your favorites, or add to favorites, it gives you, with a very little amount of effort, it actually gives you a lot more context. And it's the same with a cog, which is the typical or the floppy disk symbol for save, which is still surprising that it's still the save symbol, given floppy disks don't really exist anymore. That visual context doesn't actually help until you actually then provide the textual context as well. It's a small change that makes a big difference. Dynamic text, I could have probably truncated this a little bit more, but one thing that can be quite common is if you used anything like fixed sizes for your labels or any other control, you will always run the risk of the text being cropped if end users turn on override system font size. Now Maui does a very good job of, even with these labels, these have a hard-coded, they have a font size of, I think, 32 for here. You'll see they still grow in size, so even the fixed font size scales. You can opt out of font size scaling, but there's very few and far between reasons why you would want to do that. But yes, what you can see is actually if we turn on the scaling, override the scaling, then you'll see that you get a little bit of truncation. If you imagine that if it was even shorter, then you could potentially even lose valuable parts of the character, and then it becomes very difficult to understand what it actually means. And if anyone's got a mobile app out there, I would certainly encourage you to go and turn it on and see if anything breaks within your app. And this ties in with it. So actually, you should let the layouts do their job. So if you've got a vertical layout or a label, any of those, don't use fixed heights or widths. That will run the risk of this happening. Grids as well, if you're using fixed columns or row sizes, then that can potentially also lead into that. But the layout engine is designed to deal with moving things around, dealing with padding and spacing. So as long as you actually don't change much of it, I mean, if you run with the defaults, actually that's one thing. Gerald, who you had on at the start of the month, told me Microsoft have had their own default styles validated through for accessibility. So the default Maui styles do ship that generate you an accessible application by default. That's a very good thing to do. Touch targets, we mentioned this, so if you're trying to purchase your Uber Eats order while you're putting the young one to sleep, you can see that the icons there on the left, they're not tiny, but they can be rather difficult to hit if you've only got one hand. You can use it at the time, so you can provide much bigger touch targets. And also by doing this, it then also gives you the voice over assistant information. So you can actually always tick off a couple of these quite easily. Another thing you could do is you could put extra padding around the button to make it a bigger touch target. But again, that still leaves you a small visual. So it's debatable as to how much more that gives you. Although it will make it easier to hit, that's for sure. And that doesn't strictly compromise your visuals. And then I did mention this before, I didn't actually show it in the demo, but you can see with placeholders on the left, this doesn't have any placeholders. So if you had actually my first and surname sometimes get mixed up because Sean Lawrence is both a valid first name and surname. So you could potentially even have them in the wrong box because it's not clear on the left actually which one's which. But yeah, that's that. It gives you better cognition as well, and it's clear on the right actually all of the information that's being filled in and what it relates to. So if you're just trying to skim and find something, it even becomes easier there. Yes, I did mention this before. I don't have login on this, and I wasn't able to find a very good way of breaking this in a horrible way other than the Visual Studio Code example that I provided, where you click something on the bottom left and then the menu on the top right pops up. It's not the same. It's not you do an action and there's validation issues, but quite often it's your focus is still down on the bottom, and you're wondering why nothing has happened.
Yeah.
Without you drawing the person to their attention, it becomes quite tricky. It's not a good user experience. Another good thing, so obviously you've heard the voiceover assistant reading things out based on how it has processed and navigated the tree. You can force it to say things. You can tell it to say things. You can't force it. If it's off, it won't say anything. And so you could, for example, and actually in this app, I've modified it so it actually tells you what product you've added to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore you can actually tell them they've done it, and then they get the confirmation, the verbal confirmation that it's been done. Because quite often in an app like this, you might get a little like extra number above the basket icon, which is very subtle detail. This just gives them that verbal confirmation that.
So this is basically after like the code behind or the action is successfully or not successfully is running, we could decide like to send an extra information to the API for like voice over or other APIs on the other platforms, like to read for the user what has happened.
Yes, precisely that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And this does delegate down to each of the platform specific implementations, so that's nice. Yeah. Good. Okay, I'm probably running a little bit behind, so I'll try and speed up a little bit.
We have still like enough time to
Okay.
We have like 15 to 20 minutes time.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I might have had a bigger slide deck than I had expected, but so accessibility isn't finished when the app compiles, and I mean this is probably a fairly common diagram for most applications that we build. We develop something, we test it, and then we can improve it. And so like I say, it doesn't just stop as soon as you ship version 1. It's an iterative process, and we want to keep going until we've we don't ever really want to stop going. But yes,
I mean, depending also where you start and how you navigate between these three, you could be a test-driven developer or some, but definitely the tests should be there, whether you write them first or last. But
yes, 100%, yes, yes, and actually, in our current role, we have tester and developer start at the same point. So the tests are written while the development's written, so at the same time, so they can converge and run it, deliver it and prove it works or doesn't. But it removes the dependency from the tester being told what's been delivered. Actually think about what should be delivered, which is quite nice.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And so we never assume it works. We always verify that it works. So screen readers, I think I mentioned the semantic screen reader and the voiceover assistance. Well, I keep saying voiceover, which is the iOS, but that comes into voiceover's iOS, talkback and narrator for Windows. And what we could potentially do would do a very quick demo on just the accessible one. 1, 2, 3.
Voiceover on Maui Mart.
So we can navigate around,
Maui Mart.
take us across.
Basket,
we could view our
button,
baskets.
Menu.
We'll view that there's nothing
Checkout,
there.
Button. Checkout alert.
Oh.
Check OK.
I pushed the wrong button there, didn't I?
Tab bar. Home. Selected.
Well,
Tab. 1 of menu. Button. Home. Button.
so you can see there are multiple ways of navigating. If you think you're in the right area, you can tap on the thing you think it is. So you can tap on that there,
Image.
or you can swipe
Coffee.
and it'll take you around. And then you could, in
Coffee.
theory, come
Image.
to here, and then I
Maui
think you
add
could
to
tap that.
basket. Button. Add to basket. Add to basket. Button. Add coffee to your shopping basket. Add to basket. Button. Add to favorites. Add to alert. Favorite. Okay.
And then you'll see actually you
Product
end up
added to
hitting
favorites.
the voice assistant
Okay.
on the whole
Button.
OS as well. All of the
Coffee. Image. More emote.
platform specific
Dark
side as well.
roast. Coffee beans. Tab bar. What we
can
selected.
see is
View
here.
and edit
Now
your
we've got a
personal
much more.
information button. Personal information. First name. Heading not. Last name. Last name.
And we can jump
Email
between
address.
that.
Email address.
Headings, we could have
John.doe
actually
at
made each of those the
example.com.
first name,
Text
last name
field.
as headings, or maybe if
Enter
personal
your
information
email
had another
address. Double tap
section there, that might
profile.
then lead to.
Menu.
Sean, we're not hearing you very perfect because like the voiceover like and your voice are like overlapping. So if you could repeat like what you were telling us.
Accessibility.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was fighting with the assistant. So I don't know what you got, but so each of these options now here. So I can't highlight it because I've turned the voiceover assistant on.
Yes.
There's no headings here, but we could in theory have a heading for each of the
Mhm.
names, so you can then quite easily jump between those. Although because there's not much there, there's only 2 movements. A heading move section might not help you that much.
Mhm.
So you might have personal information and maybe another one section below. There are multiple levels of heading as well, though. So you could go top level heading being personal information and then say address details. I know it probably fits under personal information, but as an example, and then first name and last name could then be heading level 2. So you've then got multiple levels of navigation around as well. Could be quite neat. Good. Okay. So yes, screen readers are a valuable tool. I don't have my Android device with me today, but the Android accessibility scanner is really cool. You can load up your app, you load up the scanner, and then you scan your app. So you run it, you essentially run through a session, navigating through your application, and then it will then present you with warnings, and then it'll tell you how you can then, it'll give you areas which you can go in and fix, and then you can obviously iteratively do that, and then watch those warnings disappear. It's worth saying that this is some level of automated tool. They are brilliant, but they are, in my opinion, incapable of replacing humans. So there's still that reliability on us to do this job. There is the iOS accessibility inspector. Let's see if we can get that up quickly.
Mhm.
Which window is that going to pop on? Oh, it's here. So this will be a case of, hopefully it's going to work. Did that just crash on me? It might not like the fact that I've got QuickTime open as well connected to the device I want to use. Accessibility Inspector. And this is a tool that ships with Xcode. So there we go. We can see there's my phone. And this should look fairly similar to when you start navigating like some level of automation tooling. So you see I've got this select element here. What I'll do is, sadly I can't, it's not running. I've got the application running as well, but
Mhm.
the mirroring of my phone. What you can see, I've essentially selected the button from the.
We see
changes.
the button and like the tree and like things, but they are very small. I think.
So it's the accessible tool is not proving to be very accessible.
Yeah, that's kind of an irony.
Look, we can.
Ah,
There we go.
there. Now it's
that
better. Yeah, pretty
Good enough, or do you want me to keep going?
I think it's good enough, but the audience also could like give us a thumbs up or thumbs down.
I'll go a bit
But I
more.
think, at least on my side, looks good.
Okay, good. So what I've done is I've selected the Save Changes button on my phone.
Mhm.
I can't share the screen because this app was crashing while I had it connected to the mirroring software. But you see, we've got it is a button. The text is Save Changes. We've got the hint, Save your personal information changes, and then there's the user input as well, which is the same as the label. And then you'll see as we come down, this is that tree that's currently there, but actually that's how deep it is in the Maui tree.
Mhm.
but a lot of these you can't interact with. You don't interact with the collection view that I've got there, which comes into some of this, the layout view stuff. So it works quite nicely. Hopefully gives you an indication, as well as if you've got a huge tree like this with lots of options that can be interacted with, then it goes to show that actually that maybe maybe the application needs a bit of rework, whether you can simplify things. Yes. Okay. So that's a very brief intro to that accessibility.
I have one question. Also, like the audience, feel free to pose your questions if you have any. But my question is like, because the demos that you were showing, like the non-accessible version and accessible version, like the accessible version, like accumulating more space and things like that. And I think like from also the UX perspective, this might also be like you need to make some trade-offs between these two things, because I don't think both of them are like working in the same direction. Is there any best practices, or is there any kind of recommendation like that helps us like to? I'm not a UI UX expert or a mobile app developer, but is there like something that we could refer to and like compare benefits and disadvantages and advantages of each of those things?
Yes. So you mean
Yeah.
like in this example, when the
Yes.
text grew bigger, it obviously takes up more space.
Yes.
It's a very difficult one. I think if we were to look at this screen here, like there,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes difficult because you need to provide enough context to the user as to what's happening, what they're going to interact with, versus then, like not providing enough, but then there's no real screen. There's like one item on the screen. I do have a link to some really good, the WCAG web content accessibility guidelines that I don't know if it covers this thing exactly, but it does give some really good breakdowns in terms of the considerations you need to make, and it does come down to preference, I think.
Okay.
I don't want to say this is the best option, but it quite often becomes accepted that because you're increasing your text size, you are accepting that you are going to lose some screen real estate.
Yeah.
It's like changing the resolution on your screen. You can't have both in the best way. There are like some modifications you can make, but ultimately the key reason why they are increasing the text is because they can't read the detail.
Yeah.
And therefore there is a trade-off there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
It would be great if you could also share the link. I could drop it in the chat. And in the meantime, we also have another question. Is there any info on localized or international accessibility apps in Maui?
Any info on localized? Is that in regards to the information itself being localized, or localizing your accessibility information? I think if it's the
I'm not
latter.
sure if the guy I'm not sure if I could pronounce the name properly. I don't want to butcher the name, but if you could clarify more in what you mean.
I could give a very brief answer to both.
Yeah.
I know Microsoft certainly have a very good set of translated documentation, and they've got some good Maui documentation around accessibility. They have invested a fair bit of time in that. So that there is that. With localization in terms of the information you present to your screen reader, they are all bindable properties. So you could, in theory, use the same thing that you would use for localizing the text on the screen. You could use the same to localize the text to the accessible
using
reader.
the binding mechanism of XAML, like to dynamically changing the.
Yes, and actually, if I remember the right screen, I did that loosely on, I think it was here. Yes, so on this button, when you add that button to the basket, what it does is the hint will actually tell you it will add the product being displayed to your basket. It doesn't just tell you, it adds the product. So you can put dynamic data into here. There's not always static strings. These examples are, and maybe that's actually a very good thing to evolve this to show. But yes, you can certainly with the typical localization. I don't think localization is still yet in Maui directly, but there are some great plugins out there that make it.
Yeah,
Make it
I hope that
straightforward to do.
answers the question. I don't see any more questions. Any final words on the topic? We are kind of at the end of the session.
We are, yes. So
Yeah.
I'll do a quick wrap up then. Yes, so we've had a look through. We've hopefully understood some elements of accessibility, broken down some of the common problems, improved the app, had a little bit of a look at some of the tools, and hopefully learned how to build some better habits. These are the resources. Now, this is just text, but don't worry. On the last slide, there's a QR code that takes you to links. Takes you to a blog post that has all of the links,
Mm-hmm.
and the repo for this code base. The challenge I would like to leave to everyone, though, is tomorrow or later today, pick an app, whether it's your own app. I mean, your own app would probably be best. Try and turn on your voice assistant and actually experience it and see. Find the first issue that you can, because I've fallen foul of doing this. Even when I think I'm being active enough, there's always more we can do. But I would love to. I mean, I'd love to hear actually people's experience doing this, because it was a real, like, it really hit home for me when one of the first apps I built, it wasn't usable at all.
Actually, like after your talk, I'm probably going like to touch on the app ad that I mentioned. Like I created like an SDK manager for .NET SDKs, like SDKmanager.net. If the audience is interested, they could go there. And I'm gonna add at least like color blindness to because it's a console UI application, and like for the people out there, so that it could be like more useful for that. So making it more accessible.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. Progress beats perfection. So I think if you could even just make lots of small improvements, that makes someone's life better.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't see any other questions from the audience. Thank you again for everyone who watched this stream live, or for those who will be watching it later on. I hope you are having great time. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in this blue planet. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.